All right, everyone. We are live with Chubby Funster joining me for another episode of Axe to Grind. Most of you in the Axe community already know Chubby. He is the only man brave enough to do a sandbox and starter set for Axe combined as one product. Very
Yep.
bold move. Chubby, welcome to the show.
Happy to be here. Longtime fan, first time caller.
Ah,
Yeah.
I've always wanted someone to say that. Let me just drop on Twitter that we're live.
All
We
right.
are live on Axe to Grind. Join me and Chubby Funster. All right. And so, see, this is where I really wish I had like some cool virtual assistant who was like, I'm your producer and I do this for you, Alex. But instead, I'm like, no, I do this myself.
We could lean on the wife for that, I'm sure that'll go well.
Um, yes, I will. I will lean on her for that going forward. So let's see who we got. We got Cell Socks is already on here. Black Lodge Games joining in. Erudite's here. What's up, gentlemen? What's up, everyone? So Chubby, let's talk about Warlords. Let's
Yeah.
start. I think it isn't your most successful product. So let's assume people don't know what it is, and let's get the pitch.
Well, I think a lot of that is that I was so eager to launch it that I launched it before the Kickstarter put the thing outside of just the Kickstarter range. So we only had people who were on the Kickstarter who had the books even to take a look at it at first.
Right.
But Warlords of Gavardia is an alternative to the Aran Empire.
Yep.
So as much as I love, I'm a huge Rome buff, just like you. I love the Aran Empire, but I wanted to play around with a lot of other concepts than just what's in the Roman canon. And I just do a lot of times for kind of mental health things. I just like to make maps.
Mm,
I've got one we can look at later in the show that I made for X, but I just haven't written anything for it yet. Um, but I make a map, and then the map, if it's sufficiently evocative to me, becomes the driving force that I build the setting out of. So I really I like that I work on it. I do a lot of conference calls for work where I'm listening and thinking a lot, but I just get visually bored because
hmm
nothing's happening, and so I'll just sit there and work in Photoshop. Just it's a mindless thing for me to keep me from going off the rails, and I just work on a map until it gets up to where it's really coming together. If it inspires, and then I move forward with that, and that's what happened with Warlords,
Nice.
and it's a kind of a Carthaginian Venetian type alternative to what the Roman Empire became. So instead
hmm
of Rome winning the Punic Wars, you've got kind of a Carthaginian naval empire that develops out. And so they have I pulled in a lot of different ideas from different cultures in the ancient world and medieval world. And you can see a huge variety in it. There's 17 provinces, and each one of them has a very distinct flavor. And none of them are kind of carbon copies of anything that exists in the real world. I'm
Right.
totally a person who does that for a lot of things. Like I wrote a thing about Skyrim. It makes sense a lot of times, but I wanted to really innovate and bring a lot of new ideas in. So there's elements of the Spanish Imperial Empire, overseas empire. There's elements of all kinds of different administrative things. There's like a conclave system for electing a new executive that the players could tap into, and all of it was designed to use the basically chapters 7 through 12 in the ACKS core rules that a lot of times people just don't have any setup to get into the higher
Right.
level play, and so I wanted to make it so you could sit down and be playing a adventurer if you want, but you could play a conqueror or a king if you want right out of the gate, right out of the
Yep.
gate.
Yep.
So um, all of the data you need to do that for every hex. It has families, markets, morale scores, land value, everything from ACKS. So you could just sit down and you could say, okay, this noble family controls these 8 hexes. This is the value of their tax base. This is the how many soldiers they could recruit. This is anything like that. And you could just run that right out of the gate.
Awesome.
So there's a good portion of the book that is kind of, I call it a census. It's all of that data for all of those hexes.
Mm-hmm.
And I also have market data for all of the major cities that the GM could just use as a starting point for whatever value. It has values for timber and fish and gemstones and everything that's in ACKS II. And if the GM doesn't have the time to prep whatever, they could just pull one of those columns and use it for anything that they wanted. And everything is just set up like this. It's set up to tie right into those rules that a lot of people read and they go, man, I wish I could play this, but I'm level 2,
Right. Right.
Yeah. I had, when I first got the PDFs from the Kickstarter, my Saturday night group, we were running a campaign and they're like level 1 and they'll be like, well, if we take over this town and we could run it as the nobleman or whatever, and we could control the stuff. And I'm like, guys, you're level 1. You can't, there's no, you gotta get more power. You're not strong enough to stand up to other people. Yep. There's
right. Yeah. So I've got the book here on my screen. So, we start off Warlords of Gavardia, and ACKS compatible, and kind of like how to use the book, kind of lays out the differences from the Arn Empire, right? And then dives right in. And so you can see kind of like the vibe, right? There's a little bit of a kind of a Venetian vibe to it, I felt.
Yeah. I felt that was probably the strong. I love the Venetian Empire's history. It's fantastic.
I do. So I do too, actually. The Venetian Empire was one of the 3 inspirations for the Arn Empire. And you actually see it on the cover of the Arn Empire primer because it's got the statue. And if you look down, they've got canals between the buildings.
Oh,
right?
I didn't notice the canals. Okay, cool.
Yeah. So I love the Venetian. And my family, if you trace my family history back far enough, we trace back to nobles of the Venetian Empire. We were the
Cool.
We were the counts of the 7 islands of Paxus, which was ruled by the Venetian Empire. And but then we were overthrown by angry peasants and fled to Romania. So it's very sad.
Damn peasants.
Yeah.
What can you do?
What can you do?
Your domain morale got too low.
I know, right? I literally come from an ousted thing. So I loved this, by the way. So like the submission table was just fantastic to actually show like how low you have to bow.
Yeah.
It's just absolutely awesome.
I found that image, and it's a public domain image on Wikimedia.
Really?
And I was like, I have to use this thing. Like, it's such a great image. I want to use it.
It's so great. Yeah. Let's see. And then, kind of you go.
Each province, like if you go back up to where it was talking about the different types of provinces. So the provinces there's not just a standard kind of Roman province.
Yep.
So there's an imperial province, which is like full citizenship. Like that's the real Roman style. Everybody's being included. And there's a vassal province, which is kind of like military occupation.
Right.
These people haven't been fully integrated into the empire. And there's a lot of them. One of the problems that this empire has is it's overexpanded too rapidly. It's not overextended like late Roman Empire. It's overextended like they were just too successful.
Right.
Decadent. They're just too successful. And then if you go down to the next page, there's tributary provinces. The elves and the dwarves are paying a tribute to the empire, but they're still controlling their own territory.
Yep.
So when we get into things that can go wrong, there's like a whole, I think it's like 12 different things that can go wrong. One of them is that the dwarves want to admit another province. There's problems with the elves want to break away. There's things that can go wrong with the demi-humans. There's a maritime province that provides galleys rather than normal taxation, and it's run like a city-state. And then there's a mercantile province, which is like a oligarchy that runs everything, and they pay in cash.
Yep.
Right. And when we see the map, eventually there's a lot of water. So the being in control of the water is very, very important. I really love the sea voyages rules that are in ACKS II. And that was one of the first things that pushed me to start working on these things. So yeah, like you have a division within ACKS of 1,750 families to make a city. So one of those pages back there, I had that one with the seal. Yeah. In order to establish a city, they have to create this magical seal on the ground. On top of it, you can't tell falsehoods. So it's a way of maintaining equitable administration and all that. You know, you can get the truth out of the person that you're trading with and so on.
Brilliant.
So it's kind of built into there's a whole culture, like society, you know, the society section that's next has all of these cultural elements that these people have that are very different from the classic Roman Empire, right? They make a pilgrimage to this river to bathe in, which is kind of a West Indian, not West Indies like the islands, like West India, where you're bathing in a holy river. There's similar virtues to the Roman Empire, but not exactly. It's not as aggressive in certain senses. There's ways that families are formed, how you have to do hospitality is more of like an Arabic type of hospitality system. I really like this on the next page after this. There's a thing called Fields of Revival. So they have rules for what to do with the dead chaos people that you're wiping out. You bury them in a particular way in order to kind of pave way for civilization. So they've got all of this very unique culture of how they approach different things. And each province within the empire has its own variations in all of that stuff. And that can be reasons for people to work together or reasons for you to fight. But there's all kinds of rules in ACKS II about like liturgies and festival management and stuff as the domain manager. So if you're in charge of a domain and the people have a different festival that they want from what the Imperial festivals are supposed to be, then that creates an issue for you. Do you break with that and get a morale bonus in your domain, or do you insist on civilizing these people? Right. So there's a short history here. I didn't want to get into crazy details people zone out, but it's just a basic history of how the empire was put together. Just there's a list there of all the dates as it acquired each province,
which is awesome.
Right? Yep. And then when you go down, it goes into just basic. There was wars here. There's expansion. One of the province types is colonial. So they are exporting excess population to these colonies, and that could be a way that your characters go. You could say, we're going to go out here where the colonial border is real porous. Go out there and we're just going to carve out new domains on the frontier, right? And then this is what I was alluding to earlier, this instability. So there's all these different issues that it has. There's kind of a French old regime taxation problem. There's dwarf problems. There's a succession crisis. The guy who's in charge is 68 and he's about to pass. So in ACKS II, there's all those rules about senates and how to do senate votes and stuff. I tapped into some of that earlier in the book about how to run the election for a new Corono. So the Senate that votes on normal law is different from the ad hoc conclave, like Pope-like conclave to elect a new Corono. So even if you're a well-established person in the Senate, you're not going to be well positioned in this ad hoc way of making a vote. So there's all the politics of that for people who want to get into the politics. And then if you keep going down, there's more. There's a halfling shire that would be the first halfling province to be admitted, and there people wouldn't want halflings. I know there's some strong player feelings on that. There's a huge desert called the Sand Furnace that's right next to the Empire, and the kind of Arabian type invaders could come out of that and sweep in like the Arabian conquests in real life. I think, as far as I know, I have the most merfolk representation on any world map in role-playing game history. There are tons of merfolk settlements marked with a little conch shell or a swirling shell. It's not a conch shell. All over the map, and they're not governed by this empire. They're totally, they can do whatever they want. So they could be a serious problem if you feel like fighting fishmen. You could tap into that, all that kind of basis there. So there's all these different things that can go wrong. And you talk about back when I was writing this, and I've heard you say it since, that a lot of times players don't want to step in and take out what they think is the rightful ruler.
Yeah.
But all of these things provide ways for the empire to disintegrate, or at least maybe you could break it in two, like the Eastern Western Roman empires. You could break it up into 4 pieces, like the I forget what's the name of it. It starts with a D. When they split it up into split the Roman Empire into 4 divisions at one point.
Yeah, the dominate when they
yeah. And so you could do all of that to create the chaos that the players would be able to take advantage of and step in and say, well, we're gonna take over this province because the empire is falling apart. So we're gonna bring stability to that element, right? And there's two more. There could be barbarian. There's a ton of barbarians on the map. There's a system in the campaign chapter for barbarian strongholds and managing barbarian strongholds and transitioning them into civilized strongholds. So you can use that. There's elves, everybody, kill them all, right? Big problems with elves that could come out on the border. The provinces that aren't, there's an elf province that swears loyalty, but there's elves all over the place on this map. Yeah. And they could cause serious problems. So all of these things can go wrong. And I think people are a fan of entropy. They like to see the politics dissolve and see where they can step in and take action.
Absolutely the case. Yeah, I mean, these are just great hooks, and then for every province you've got languages, just a ton of stuff.
Go back up a little bit to the one where it's Ocho Sangrietto. It's one more page up. Okay, so this is alternative to the gladiatorial system within Rome, right? So they have a sport called Ocho Sangrietto, the Bloody Eight, right? And this is a way for slaves to get their freedom. So you form like a team that gets sponsored by nobles, and if you go through enough battles, you get your freedom, right? And the first battle takes place in an arena with 6 inches of water in it, and then every successive battle, the water level rises, and at the end, you're fighting a giant octopus instead of an opposing team. So all of the, as the water level goes up, you're going to move slower. You're going to have problems with magic. You're going to have, I forgot, magic use is prohibited. I was just thinking of the problems, but you could change that if you wanted as the GM. But there's all these ways of, you could introduce new characters this way. You guys have to fight your way through 8 of these battles and succeed. So there's all sorts of ways to introduce new parties.
Yeah, I think a gladiatorial campaign would be a lot of fun. I did on the ACKS Discord a couple years back. We ran a mini campaign where folks were playing Lanista, and they would trade and hire gladiators and pit them against each other. We had a real blast with it. I imagine something like this would be really fun, where the party is playing, a group of Bloody Eight, and they've got to advance. And, they're trying to cheat and figure out how to smuggle in magic. I mean, it would be great fun. Yeah.
Yeah.
Great
And
fun.
each of these provinces has different stuff that is from all sorts of different real world elements. There's mound building cultures. There's also there's this kind of Turkish
Yep.
bath type cultures. There's all these different ways of having food and seasons and all that stuff to make it so that it's not the same province no matter where you go. You play a game in one of these provinces, it's going to be very different
Yeah.
from going to any of the others.
Yep.
There's just all sorts of different ideas that people can bring in and make it their own unique campaign. Right there
Yeah,
was
you've got a really wide ethnic footprint to
I was like,
draw
go
on.
back up to Ashar there.
Yeah, yeah.
This is my favorite one. The festivals there for Ashar. They have a spring wind festival, and this is not a Imperial festival, so there would be a conflict here for you if you were in charge. But they pick the two ugliest people on the island by vote, and then they chase those people around, and whoever they kill first, that person is like sacrificed and burnt on a pyre and blown out to sea to give them good winds in the future. And I think this is a great example. There's tons of things in here where the players read this and go, I want to be on the island when they have this festival, right?
Yep.
And I think this is a good place to talk about. This whole book is designed to be given to the player. All of this is player-facing information because ACKS II puts so much power in the hands of the player. Even if you're not running a domain, you have to make all kinds of decisions as a player. So, it shows here like that family, the Cabravales under the Conde title, they control all those hexes. And so they would be the higher level domain over the Guani and Legina families that are the kind of underneath them. And then all of those hidalgos are basically barons in the ACKS system, right? So they all have just one province, right? So at you could be any level there that you wanted to be. You could have one player be the top level conde and a couple people be the viscount, and then a bunch of hidalgos that are all working together as within the feudal brotherhood, so to speak.
Yeah.
So there's just a lot of opportunity for whatever the player wants. The player can look through all this stuff and find a province that they want to live in, find the noble family that they want to be, calculate how much of an army they could raise. There's a holy war system where you don't have to take a huge army. You can just take basically a army for a foray into the enemy territory and just raid them and bring back stuff.
Right.
So you could put together a small army in ACKS, standards. You could just a few hundred soldiers, and you could just go in there and run a big raid and then come home. And do it like that. You don't have to fight a full war if you don't want to get into those details. And then these are the trade values. So it has every trade good in all these different cities. So your venturer can sit there and look at the book. It's a player facing book. The venturer can look at this and go, all right, if we pick up metal in this city and then sail to this other city, we can make arbitrage profits. So all the stuff, like I said, chapters 7 through 12 that you want to get into, but you haven't been able to actually play. And this is my special message at the back of the book for not being a coward and a wimp about conquering things. People want to act like it's, I feel bad about being in charge. Well, if you're not going to be in charge, who's going to be in charge? Somebody worse than you? Is that who you want to be in charge? You want the Aztecs to be ripping your heart out, or do you want the Spanish to come in and take over and fix that problem? That's kind of the situation here. That I'm trying to encourage people to take up the sword, take up become a military leader, civilize barbarians, take over their territory and colonize it. There's rules and ACKS for immigration and settlement and clearing new territory and doing land value assessments and all that kind of stuff.
Yep.
And you can do all that within this system.
It's so funny to me. You have, your the pseudonym, your sobriquet that you write under, Chubby Funster.
Yeah.
It's just like, it's like the nicest, sort of sounds like you're the gentlest guy ever, right? And then you get to like this last page, and it's straight out of the Gates of Fire, and Leonidas is urging his men to dine in hell. I think you might need to come up with a new handle for yourself. Chubby Funster is underselling the level of glorious arete that is on display on this page, man.
Yeah. Well, you start out thinking that your way of approaching problems is normal, and then you meet people on the internet who are like, well, why would we want to stop these people from ripping other people's hearts out? We should just teach them to love each other. Well, good luck with that. Good luck with that. So that page is a result of a long time of getting into internet argument. I don't do it anymore. I'm just tired of the people who both of us. I don't know how many people know this, but both of us are really well educated in currency and economic history.
Yeah.
And so I constantly get people saying the most idiotic things about finance or economics and stuff, and I'm like, you have no idea what you're talking about. It's ridiculous.
Yep.
Yeah. The scariest class I ever took was advanced currency myth. Yeah, I mean, like, it's insane to think all these things are going on that most people have absolutely no clue they don't even know what petrodollar recycling is, much less how actual currency valuations are made and so on. So I just, I try to keep quiet about it and be a chubby funster, but sometimes you got to pull out the sword,
I feel you. Are you a finance guy in your day life?
No, I do corporate training stuff. So
okay.
I write like virtual reality and augmented reality training for really cool devices. I don't want to list them in public, but just awesome stuff that just learning about it is a cool day. It's great stuff. And then finding ways to train people on these things using virtual reality and augmented reality.
That's really cool.
But before I did that, I did a ton of stuff in layout design. I did insurance booklet design and all kinds of things like that. That's where I learned how to do layout and graphics. I still do some graphics to like explain things to people, like this is how it's going to look or how it's going to work, whatever. But I don't do like full graphic design anymore.
Right. That sounds like a fun day job for sure.
Yeah, and it's not as cool as going to West Point, I think, but other stuff.
I dropped out of West Point. It wasn't that cool, or I wasn't that cool. One of the two. Let's see. We got a lot of comments. Let's take a look here. See what folks are saying. So let's see. Let's see. I got Warlords in the mail. Says sell socks. So we already got someone who's got it.
Awesome.
Yorick says, I found with my sandbox play and one-to-one time, the players tend to split up doing their own thing more often than not. What are some ways to encourage party play or working together without falling into railroading? You have thoughts on that at all?
Yeah, I do. One of the things is just dealing with large scale problems. So it's not that you've got one goblin warren on the other side of the hill, but that there's 48 goblin warrens and they're raising an army. That your desire to run off and deal with some individual problem is dwarfed by the seriousness of what you have to do, right? And a lot of times I've been in campaigns where there's a big goal and people are like, well, I want to take a time and go do this individual goal, but we really got to kill these gnolls before they eat everybody in town. We really have to go deal with this problem. I think that is the best way to do it. In general, I do that by rumors and to avoid railroading, so that I'm not telling them, the the goblins are coming, so to speak, is that they're hearing rumors about people getting eaten or killed or farms getting raided, and then that's what they would pursue. So it's still up to them. They can ignore it, and then the campaign will be about recovering their domain rather than managing it. Yeah, but that's the kind of thing, is give them big problems. A lot of times especially in old school, we kind of avoid and I don't want to get into like a video game level of like, this is the end of the world if you don't deal with this problem. But there are really big problems in real life.
Exactly.
Kingdom Come Deliverance is one of my favorite video games, and it takes place while the country is being invaded by a foreign army. There's soldiers everywhere, from humans from the steppe that have been brought in as mercenaries. There's all this stuff going on. So it's not like, oh, la-di-da, I'll just ride around and take in the sights. Like stuff's happening. Really, real danger is at play.
Exactly.
People respond to they like dealing with real problems.
Yep. I have a heuristic I found really valuable. So you run a combat, right? And you notice at a certain point that the players begin competing amongst themselves in the combat to see who's going to be the cool guy that gets the most cleaves, or the cool guy who kills the big bad. So that, like, if Bob kills the big bad, Jim is a little disappointed because Jim was hoping he would get to use his swift sword to kill the big bad, right? And that to me is always a sign that the challenge level of the game is too low. If the players are competing amongst themselves about who's going to be the coolest, effortless, awesome badass who kills the big bad, then that means the big bad was never really scary. The appropriate challenge level at the tactical game is when the players are cheering when Bob kills the big bad, because holy crap, I thought we were all going to die, and then Bob saved our lives. That's the appropriate difficulty level. And I take that same approach at the meta campaign level, right? It's just like you're saying. If Jim is resentful that Bob just spent some time researching a new magic weapon, then something's gone wrong, right? Bob should be excited that Jim has a magic weapon that's going to help us, because otherwise we are dying,
That's right.
Yeah. So that's, I think, a really important lesson for running ACKS, right? Is the number one reason for people to cooperate is fear that they will be doomed if they don't cooperate.
And ACKS has so many downtime activities that the players can do between sessions if that's what they really want to do. He brought up one-to-one time. If you're running this like a BroSR type game, then you're going to have downtime where you can run hijinks, and you can try to do Senate politics, and you can try to set up your mercantile ventures as the venturer or whatever. I think there's lots of room for that and still be going out there and campaigning. I think a lot of times people try to fit everything into their weekly or bi-weekly session rather than move it out to something that's handled between a player and a GM on the side. You don't have to do it every day, like in a one-to-one Bronstein or something. But if you just have a couple of back and forth PMs with the GM, like, hey, we're in this town. I want to try to buy salt over the next 4 days. Here's my, rolls I made in Roll20 for the marketing, all the market rolls that the venturer needs to make. Like, how much salt can I buy up while we're waiting for the barge to arrive to take us to the next town, whatever it is that you're doing. And that way you're not wasting session time dealing with that math. We got bogged down in my game with a little venturer action, and eventually just had to be like, we're just going to do this off screen, because I can't take time up during our playtime to do that. And that's cool. But one of the things that I think is fantastic about ACKS II and ACKS I also, but is that you can pick and choose what you're going to bring into it based on how much excitement you have for it. If you don't want to run a domain game, don't run it.
Yeah, exactly.
If you don't want to take time out to calculate your sea voyage, across the channel, then don't do that. Just abstract that and move on. But the rules are there for people who do want to do that. And yeah, that was the big push when I wrote this book. Like I want to be able to execute on that. Do you have the map up? I have the map up. I'd like you want me to share it?
Yeah, go ahead and share it.
Yeah. So like the distance, I just wanted to show the distances involved. Where's the?
Are you? You might not be.
It's not letting me pick the right tab. That's weird. Oh well, I'll work on that a little bit. I'm not sure if this is.
Here, I can bring up the map. It's no problem.
I'm not sure why it's showing me a list, but it doesn't have the list of the map in the list that I was.
Yeah,
selecting.
no problem. Here,
This is really zoomed out right here, and this is a huge, vast map. It's 99 by 99 hex grid. And yeah, if you go in here, like go to the middle of the map, and you can see how far it is from the islands. Yeah, you can go way down.
Yeah, so it's a very big map.
Yeah, and yeah, column 2, row 99. Yeah, but yeah, if you can zoom out and go over where the water, in the middle where there's a ton of water. You know, like look at the distances there between Ashar and Hadimi. You're looking at what's that, 10, maybe 10 hexes. That's a long sea voyage in ACKS rules. And if you want to run that where you're potentially running into merfolk or other kind of, there's tons of sea monsters, you know, you could run into crossing any of these waterways. A lot of the provinces are islands, and so there's just tons of space for the GM to use for all of those activities that normally you wouldn't be able to tap into.
Yeah.
And there you can see that little icon out there in the water. There's a merfolk city out there. You know, there's stuff like that. So if you're going to cross over that territory, are you going to make deals with them, or are you going to work, you know, you're going to try to run the blockade, so to speak? You know, how are you going to interact with these people? So this is that kind of having the space to do whatever you want to do. If you want to run an individual adventure, you can cross over the Imperial border into the borderland and just it's wilderness.
Yep.
And you can carve that out. And when we get to Mulyotti the Conqueror, you can see like that's exactly how you would run it. You would say, you know, there's all these different options for you out beyond the border and within the border to choose how you're going to play as a high level character.
Yeah, exactly. So we'll pull up Mulyotti in a sec. We got a hilarious question from John Miller here. When did your ancestors leave Venice? When was the result? Was it during the 19th century or before? So if you go to the website History of Paxus, what you see is in 1797, after 411 years in possession of the Venetians, control of Paxus passed to the French Republic. Under the secret articles of the Treaty of Tilsit, signed on 8 July 1807, the Ionian Islands were ceded to the French Empire. The British blockaded the islands, causing a massive food shortage, which led the Paxiotes to revolt. The governor, Count Dimachus Macris, was killed, and several others were injured. And so that was my ancestors, Count Dimachus Macris, and he was killed. And our chateau at Macrotica was burned down, and we fled to Romania. And so we trace our ancestry back to the surviving son of that family that fled to Romania. And when I was a little kid, we actually went to the ruined wreckage of Count Macris's chateau, and I vowed I would one day rebuild it. But sadly, that never worked out.
Sounds like a future Kickstarter stretch goal.
Yeah, no, totally, right?
Yeah, if you can get enough money to repurchase the Macris estate.
Right.
There you
Yeah,
go.
so Adventurer Conqueror King, I come by it honestly. I come from a long line of oppressive aristocrats who've been overthrown by their peasants in a rebellion because of food shortages. So, yeah. All right, let's why don't we talk about uh your other product that you have done for ACKS, Conquerors.
So Mulyotti the Conqueror is a 9th level module. Basically, you're starting as a 9th level character. The Mulyotti, that's his, he's the fighter who's made it to level 9. All the other characters are level 8, and like I have a copy of it right here. And your characters are kind of pre-built out in here, and you can just take over there's a lot of room for you to customize it if you want, but you could run it with this right out of the gate. You wouldn't have to make a new character sheet unless you really wanted to. And they've got a few items, and they've got a lot of money in reserve that they've put up. And so the game gives I cut out a part of the map for Gavardia, and it's you're in this developed city within a province, and you can choose all these different options that are across the sea from where you are. There's islands that are relatively uninhabited that you could take over and make into your first domain and start colonizing. And then there's islands that are occupied by beastmen. There's places that are occupied by like monster, just wilderness with big scary monsters in it. There's undead necropolises and stuff that you've discovered. And the content, like Gavardia, is presented as player facing, almost as if it's your diary of your campaign notes. You say, we went to this place, we found a necropolis, and there were all these undead, and we pulled out after killing this many of them. We went to this place and we scouted out, and there was a dragon, and we didn't want to mess with him, so we left. Here at this place, we killed everybody and burnt everything to the ground. So there shouldn't be anything left here, but maybe they came back. And so you have all those notes, and you can sit down as a player and look through all those notes and go, here's my plan. Mm-hmm. Right. One of my biggest criticisms of live play in general is that the best part of role playing is occurring inside the skulls of all the players. It's not happening in voice. It's happening in that they're all sitting there going, how can I deal with this problem? And that's true whether it's you're trying to figure out a way to get through some kind of weird dungeon trap or door or whatever, or whether you're trying to deal with big political problems. You just sit around and have people brainstorming. They're like, well, we could kill this guy, we could do this, we could land our army on the backside of the island and then climb up using ropes, so we could do this, we could do that. That doesn't make for good TV, right? That's not good visual, but it is fantastic play. It's great fun. And so it doesn't translate when you put it up as a live play, right? Yeah. So this book has a how to use this book at the beginning. This book is, for you as the player. And then it goes through all of the characters first, and it shows you, as the short form of all of them. There's a fighter and an explorer and a thief and so on. It has each character, and they all have a little bit of an entourage because these are not level 9 or level 8 players. The Mulyotti has a pregnant wife. It's 5 months pregnant. Mm-hmm. And so what is he going to do with this life? Is he going to stop adventuring and set up a domain to have his kid who's going to inherit this land that he's conquering? These are serious issues, but Birthright was the first one to deal with this, but ACKS has all these rules for how to handle the domain stuff too. There's a lot of play here that people can tap into. There's mercenaries that these guys have, or followers that they've attracted, everything to bring with them. They have horses that, like Hadavar is this guy's horse, a medium horse with chainmail barding, and it has notes there about what loads it can carry for you to make your plans.
Mhm.
All
Mhm.
these are henchmen that they've hired, specialists. This guy has an animal trainer. So do you want to? He going to be motivated to go to a place where you could take animals alive and train your own hippogriffs and stuff? What is it that you're going to do with these guys? The thief has the ability to go ahead and start building up a syndicate. He has the money to do it. He just needs to get up to level 9 to take over getting the XP for it. But he could start his own syndicate at this point. And you can see they have huge cash reserves, each one, because they're prudent. They have reserve XP that they've banked. So even if they die, they can come back as maybe level 6 instead of being totally washed out. So there's that security. And I hand built all of these characters. So if you find any errors, that's on me, but it's as detailed as I felt I could make it without it being me telling you how to play your character.
Yeah.
And so I picked some spells. You could easily go, I'd rather sub out some of these spells, and I don't think the GM would have a problem with that, but they're there if you don't want to do that. Every character has languages, proficiencies, all that stuff is built out, right? So you can just jump right in. You could give this to somebody who's never played a high level campaign, and they wouldn't be overwhelmed by all the things that they'd have to figure out because it's already figured out for them. A lot of this, I think you could just give to somebody and they could play for quite some time without any, serious reading of the book, even, which we all know happens.
Yep, absolutely.
So yeah, it's easier when you have somebody who's like a real OSE veteran or something, and you hand them that, and you're like, you'll be good with this, but you can still run it with brand new person. So there's barbarian characters from it's a campaign class, I think, right?
Yep.
And then he has different combat abilities compared to the main fighter, right? Yeah. He's not the same. So there's no duplication. Everybody has really good niche protection in how they've all evolved, right? He has a shaman. He's the only one with a shaman as a henchman,
right? Awesome.
So you can use that class, right? That's a paladin, I'm pretty sure. I haven't looked at him in a few days, but yeah. So
he's the paladin with the hot elf wife.
He has a hot elf wife. Man, I had that piece of art from William McAusland, his stock artist. I haven't had any place to use it because I generally don't have kind of sexualized art in anything, but I felt like this was the place to pull it out, But
there you go. Yeah,
I could use it.
We should give a shout out to him because William McAusland is a really, really talented artist. I have used him in many of my books. He's really one of the best in the business for just delivers a really big spread of stock art that you can drop in when you need it. Just top notch. I think I have every single one of his stock art.
I do too. I have they come in like packs of 10 or something. I have got all 12 of them, 15, however many there are.
Yeah. He's just really talented.
Fantastic stuff.
So I literally recognize some of this art, and then some of this looks like
that is public domain.
Public domain wood print. Yeah.
With a few Photoshop filters, you can make a lot of public domain art look really good. I had here basically a page where all I really needed to do was show you what these icons represent.
Yep.
So I figured a nice big woodcut transition. So this is all the hexes that they've explored so far.
Yeah.
Right? So it has, we located ruins here. There's some of these have like partially destroyed strongholds that you could build back up for less cost than building a stronghold from scratch. But they all have kind of drawbacks. There's a reason why they're destroyed. There's places where the party has ruined things politically. There's places where they've done well politically. There's barbarians that want to kill them. There's barbarians that are friendly. all these different places. There's dungeon sites, like the black abyss of unfathomable evil. You have all these great rules in Acts 2 for making random sites, and you also have great rule. This is one thing that I really don't hear a lot of people talk about, but there are abstracting rules in Acts for just saying we went into the dungeon and came back and we make a few rolls, and we don't have to actually do that.
Right.
We can just we're mostly running our domain, but we're going to go crush this level 3 dungeon basically and wipe it out and come back with the loot, and we're just going to make a few rolls and this henchman died in the event, and then move on with our life. And so you could use all that kind of stuff. Horribly tainted evil halflings.
We had to kill them all and purify the bodies with fire.
So but like I said, this is all player facing. This is your stuff. You already know all this stuff, so you can plan how to run we're going to go clear out this necropolis. We're going to go build a fort on this island. We're going to build a church on this place. Like whatever it is that your characters want to do, you can make those decisions and run it. Mulyotti wants to settle a domain. How can the other players support that, find a room for them in doing it? And it's very daunting to tell somebody, okay, today we're going to start out with level 9 characters and we're going to go. How does the GM at the start of the campaign convey all the information a level 9 character would already have?
Yeah.
Right. There's classes like the Venturer and the Explorer that have massive ranges of hexes that they would be familiar with already if they're level 9 and level 8. And so this is a couple of the cities at the back here that are detailed that these are the cities they've been operating out of, right? So they've discovered that there's a really good armorer here, right? Mm-hmm. And he's completed masterwork commissions for them. So if they need to come back and find somebody to do it, they can do that. There's people that there's opportunities here for them to, like I was saying, the thief could set up syndicates. I think it's this one because of that big, this blue pearl is already a hideout that they're aware of, right? So, it was established by Teresio. So he's already in control of this hideout, but he doesn't have it fully stocked because he's still level 8.
Yep.
Right. So there's all these opportunities to just step right in without the GM having to come up with all this stuff. And then the party can go to the GM and say, this is the island we're going to, this is what we're going to do. And then the GM can use the tools in ACKS to build all that out without having to, you don't have to build the whole world for the players. They can make the decisions, they can evaluate the situation, and they say, we're going to go kill the Viper Lord. We're going to go do this and that. And then that becomes their quest. But I know you are too, a huge player choice advocate that the decision needs to be with them. And it's one thing to talk about quantum ogres and talk about how things should be theoretically. And it's another thing to actually implement it in your game. Players get real choices and drive the campaign. That's what the goal of this module was.
Yeah, it's really great. It's really great. You could actually go through and you could basically see as you're scrolling through it, you can see, okay, so this is a dungeon. This is a, this is a dungeon. This is a dungeon. And then, you could build this out into an entire full-fledged line of products if you wanted to.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, it's great. And the other thing is, if the players didn't want to play the high-level characters, you could, as the GM, you could actually say such and such group died horribly, and you've inherited their journal. And this Mulyotti was your uncle. Here's his journal. Roll up new characters. Go. And
that's a great idea. I had never thought about that. That is an awesome idea.
Right, because then it would actually they'd have these notes, but they wouldn't really know more context than what's in the notes, and it would be great. You could just run from there. And it's been a month, so things may have changed, but here you go. There's the notes. Yeah, it's a really great, this scouting ledger concept. When I saw what you had done, I was so impressed. This was, I thought, one of the most innovative things I think anyone's done for ACKS was this
Thank
scouting
you.
ledger concept. Just really clever, really clever. So yeah. So guys, if you don't have this, you should absolutely, this, if you're an ACKS GM, this should be on your must buy list. Even if you don't plan to use Gavardia or the setting, I mean, just like scrolling through, it's filled with things that you could just slot into your own campaign as interesting locations, points of interest, high level NPCs, like, random towns. Like, I myself, as a GM, I consider scavenging to be a fine art. So even if I don't use every aspect of something, I will absolutely pull it in and be like, oh, I've reskinned this, but I'm using this and I plug this in here. And this is just chock full of stuff. So, if anyone who's thinking about running ACKS II should absolutely have this product, in my opinion. So
Thank you for the kind words.
yeah. So, and
No,
they should also have Warlords of Gavardia too. But I think this one is Warlords of Gavardia is useful if you want to think about how would I go about building out a world, or I want to run in the Gavardia world. Whereas this one is useful. Like, this one is useful even if you were just playing Labyrinth Lord or something. Like, you could find use in it.
That is true. All this stuff, both books, is designed. It could be used for anything else. It has, the stats for land for ACKS, morale scores and land values, but it doesn't have any stat blocks for any of these creatures. You could definitely run it in any other setting if you wanted. Why would you want to? But yeah, you could.
Yeah, so let's take a look. We got some comments here. So Castellan's Keep says, I held to one time for over a year, but I lost it to a colossal dungeon delve that no one wants to abstract. Yes, it's hard to do one time in a dungeon delve. I agree. Do you, Chubby? Do you run one time, or do you run a more traditional time?
I don't.
I don't know.
I have a Saturday night group that is very switchy. And so we like to play Alien, we'll play Traveler, we'll play medieval fantasy stuff, we'll play cyberpunk stuff, whatever it is. And so I don't have a campaign generally that runs long enough that would make sense to run as a one-to-one time. ACKS II, the ACKS II campaign was the longest one we ever run. It was like 9 months.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't want to be diplomatic about this to the guys in my Saturday night group, but I think it's just they didn't have the fortitude and willpower to keep it. Game requires a level of player investment that is difficult to sustain over a long period of time. I don't fault anybody for being unable to sustain it. That's what I'm saying. I don't want to,
Yeah, I get it.
I don't want to stomp on anybody. It's just after a while, it becomes difficult for the player to stay engaged at the level. People are used to playing and leaving a lot of things to the GM, and for them to have to be checking their venturer rules to figure out how much they're going to trade this for in this city and so on, and doing magical research and things like that. Like, people just, unless you get a really dedicated group, once you get above a certain level, I think we're 5th, it becomes a lot more demanding, and I think they just didn't have it in them. And so then when the next shiny object comes along, it goes, well, let's play this for a couple weeks, and then you end up abandoning the campaign. But a fantastic campaign. Had a great time. I love ACKS to death. And I probably played way more sessions of ACKS II than I have of Shadowdark, even though I'm known for being a big Shadowdark publisher. Just because I was playing every week for 9 months, it's a lot of time.
Yeah, ACKS is designed for long campaigns in a way that a lot of contemporary RPGs no longer are. Like, most contemporary RPGs are designed for 5 sessions, 10 sessions, and then people move on to something else. My first ACKS campaign was over 100 sessions long. My Lord of the Rings ACKS was like 75 sessions long. We just hit 55 sessions on Great Brotherhood. But it takes a certain level of dedication and wanting that long-term payoff that not everybody wants.
Yeah, I was really impressed that my guys made it 9 months, because, like I said, we switch games all the time, and play different stuff, and it's just it's a very compelling game for a very long time. I can't praise it enough. But when I get to this question here,
Yuan-T has got a question for you.
Do I run my campaign with multiple drama fail states? I always run a campaign with multiple things that are going wrong if you don't deal with them. And the players can't possibly deal with them all simultaneously. So then things get progressively worse. There was a module that I designed for my own OSR game, Ambition and Avarice, that utilized this system. It's been converted to Shadowdark as well. The conversion to ACKS II would take my whole rest of my year. It's a hugely detailed campaign, but it has tons of villains on the map that are actively doing things, right? And as you go around, if there's an island, for instance, where there's a lich who has a stronghold that he has a huge labyrinth underneath the stronghold that he's raising a ton of undead and building this huge undead army. On the other end of the island, there's an archdevil who has taken over the humans that are living on the island and doesn't want the lich to be successful in killing all the humans. And then there's 2 dragons that also live on the island. So no matter which one of those 4 things you start effing up, the other 3 are gonna step in and intervene as well. If you take out that archdevil, because he's in the most obvious position, he's in the human settlement and you're aware of him, then all of a sudden an army of 2,000 skeletons comes out of this lich's fortress, you're screwed. So that I think is running. I use a ton of rumors to make sure that they're aware of things going wrong. That one of the
absolutely.
The biggest complaint that I think my players have about me is the analysis paralysis. They have so many things that they're aware of. There's a ziggurat over there. There's a pyramid over there. There's something going on in that jungle. There's apes that are ripping people apart on this island. What are we going to do? Which one of these things are we going to deal with? And then whichever one they do deal with, the other ones are going even worse. So by the time they get over there, the apes have killed everybody on the island, and they're built some kind of weird temple to the evil gods. And now you got to deal with, empowered apes that are like level 5 instead of level 2. That kind of problem. I think it's important because players get in this. It's a video game like mentality. I think I love video games, so I'm not trashing on that. But I'm gonna slowly, systematically clear off every little thing that's in here. I remember playing Diablo 1, and it was kill everything on level 1, and then you go to level 2 and you kill everything on level 2, and that makes sense in a fake video game environment. But in real life, if you're spending all of your time perfectly clearing out an area, other things are going wrong that you're not dealing with, and then there's more problems.
I had a very funny experience running Oplenian Nights, which was my kind of Arabian-inspired ACKS campaign, Chubby. And so I had in Oplenian Nights, there was a Thracian tyrant who was sleeping in torpor, waiting for the awakening, with an army of Thracian mummies. And so imagine, if you will, there's an oasis, and in the oasis is a lake. And the lake is filled not with water, but with poison. And in the lake is a kraken that's undead. And at the bottom of the lake, guarded by the undead kraken,
worse and worse,
is a cave entrance. And the cave entrance is magically sealed. And above the cave entrance, it says, "We have magically sealed this cave entrance to keep the Thracian tyrant inside it. Don't break the seal no matter what you do. And so my adventurers are like, you know what we should do? We should break the seal. And so
right.
they spend all of their money and resources building essentially like a massive like hoist in order to lift the undead kraken out of the oasis so they can kill it above the poison water.
Oh
And
my
then they
gosh.
custom research to be able to go into the poison water to then break the seal, thinking because there's got to be so much treasure there. And so they went out of their way to wake up the biggest threat that was not supposed to wake up until the awakening years later, and just wrecked that campaign. Like, undead come pouring out, starter town is destroyed, major city is destroyed, group is exiled, flees into the desert of desolation, spends the next 50 sessions trying to recover from the setbacks, and then ultimately dies to party wipe to the Thracian tyrant.
Hey,
so
problems I created for myself.
player
The
agency
RPG
right there.
story. Yes.
Yeah.
It's a big thing. Yeah. There's other tricks like steal from the players. There's nothing players hate more than having you could steal 2 gold pieces from a player and they will chase you across 2 continents to get that gold piece back. I mean, there's tricks like that to get, but most of the time people create their own problem. Yeah, they're happy to go charge right into the buzzsaw.
Yeah, it's true. So we got a couple comments here. So UNT says, ACKS is a new paradigm where rules mastery is rewarded in a not Munchkin way. It's taken my players a long time to realize this difference. I think that that's true, and that's probably the hardest thing I have in marketing ACKS, is that it takes a bit of an investment before you see the payoff. It's kind of like it's like dieting and exercise, right? Like, it just sucks at first, and you don't really get. You're like, why am I doing this? And you have to do it for like 2 years to become a ripped bronze god. And I'm just like, I don't have 2 years to become a ripped bronze god, so I never exercise.
Yeah, it's tough. The way that how you convey that to other people, I wish I had some magic answer.
Yeah.
It's very difficult. The thing to me is just saying to be like, it gets you into incredible situations that you don't normally get into.
Yeah.
Being able to make decisions you don't normally get to make.
Yeah. I've had, and I've talked to other GMs who've had this experience as well. So I was running it for my group, and I had some new players that hadn't played ACKS before. And it was like early on, they were like, oh, I don't quite get it. I don't quite get it. We're doing pirate ACKS right now, where they're pirates in the Amos Array. And then one day, one of the guys, it like totally clicked for him. And all of a sudden he shows up and he's like spent the whole weekend creating this massive navigational chart where he's got all the islands and everything on this huge map that we've rolled out the table with little ship counters so that we can move around. And he's just totally invested in it. And he's like taken all these proficiencies now so he can start customizing his character. And it was just like a light bulb went off. And if I could figure out how to convey that light bulb moment in marketing, like, yeah. Yep. The players become more and more highly motivated as their stuff becomes threatened. Absolutely. That's right. Yeah. Because so Breadbox says, I desperately want to play ACKS and I just don't have enough highly motivated players to pull it off. So Breadbox, what I would tell you is start off as if you're just running a traditional game at the low levels and slowly feed it into them. Like, one thing you can do, an idea I've used successfully, and it's similar to what Chubby did, but at a lower level, is like, instead of, you need to clear this dungeon because the legate said so, what you can actually do is have them start off as owning the fort, but it's a rundown piece of shit that they inherited from their parents, but nevertheless, it's theirs. And so now they're protecting it, not because the Lord told them to, but because it's theirs, right? And it triggers that, I own this, I should act differently vibe that goes off in people's head. That's
well, there was a fort in the campaign that I ran for 9 months that controlled the road that led back to civilization.
Mm-hmm.
And so they came out into kind of a sandboxy area where I had put a bunch of dungeons, and they could just go between. There were 3 or 4 dungeons at one time that they could, do I want to deal with this one or that one? And the unifying problem was that they had to go back through this fort in order to get back home. And so at one point I had I can't remember if it was a cyclops or a giant that started throwing boulders at the fort to try to get people to abandon it. And the players were like, well, we have to deal with this because we can't have this fort knocked out and then we're going to be trying to bring loads of treasure back on an undefended road. And so if you make it so that they have problems that they can't avoid, like I have to deal with this problem before I can continue play, that will invest them in solving that problem. People,
right.
In real life, people don't solve problems unless it threatens them in some way most of the time.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. The other thing I found that caused a light bulb moment to go off is in a lot of games, the domain activities like mercantile ventures or military activity, like maybe you get some gold, but those games don't even have that much to spend gold on, and gold doesn't give you XP like, in 3rd, 4th, 5th edition vibe. Whereas in ACKS, those things, not only do they get you gold, but they can sometimes give you a lot of experience points. And I remember the first time we did a mass battle and the players collected all the spoils of war and they got all the experience points from winning the battle. They were like, holy crap, we need to fight battles all the time. This was amazing. And then again, it was like this light bulb moment went off for them that conquest, pays off.
Another recommendation for getting players is the ACKS Discord has a lot of people on there that are already primed to some degree to want to get into it. I know it's tough to bring randos into your life. I get it. But if you want to maybe bring one rando in at a time, then it's more manageable. I wouldn't put together a whole group of brand new people you've never talked to before. But that's the kind of thing, recruit on that basis. Don't try to take your group that's been playing Fate for a long time and loves Spirit of the Century and then tell them, oh, we're going to run ACKS. I mean, that's probably going to be a jarring switch. But if you find people that are already into that, then it'll work.
That's right. So UNT says, has Chubby seen positive response from the Scout Ledger method? Rumors are tried and true. Curious if the Ledger was worth it.
Yeah, I when I did some playtesting, the main thing was verification. Landing is okay. We've heard that there's this thing. There's one spot where I can't remember if it's hornets or bees, giant insects that are there. And the players had gone there before and harvested a bunch of this honey that had healing properties. And so they were like, okay, well, if we are gonna adventure in this area, it'd be good to stock up on this honey again. So you go there and you're in a boat, right? So you observe from the sea, and then players in ACKS, in my experience, are very cautious, right? So they come in, slide in, look and say, okay, are these, because they don't want to get surrounded by 25 4-hit die creatures, that's a problem. So, scout it out, use magic, figure out if it's right. And then if it's right, then deal with it. If it could be something else or not, but it gives them some kind of a plan. If you're looking at 5 islands that nothing about, that goes back to the quantum ogre problem, right? Like, I don't know anything about these islands, so I can't possibly make a meaningful decision about whether I'm going to go with this island or that island, right? But if I know that there is a knoll settlement on that island, I can go, let's go there and wipe them out, and then try to figure out our next step from there. But we'll be at least moving into an existing settlement rather than just building something whole cloth, right? So that kind of thing, it gives them something. People have a very hard time. This is why people say, it's hard to write with a blank page. As soon as you start putting things on the page, it becomes easier for your brain to build around those objects.
Absolutely. Yeah. Which is why I always, as I was mentioning earlier, I always find scavenging really valuable as a GM, right? Like, open up my folder of maps and existing books and just start throwing stuff on, into the gazetteer, and like the story almost sort of synthetically emerges from it. And I think as a player, if you gave me that story ledger, or scouting ledger rather, that I would do the same thing, right? Like I would be like looking at it and figuring out, like for instance, just skimming through it, you notice there's a whole cluster where you're like, oh, they encountered a Keiko demon. Oh, they encountered a Keiko demon. Oh, they encountered a Keiko demon. And my immediate reaction as a player, as I'm reading this, is I want to like look at the map now and start plotting the Keiko demon encounters to try and see if I can deduce where the source of the Keiko demon invasion is, right?
They all occur in a particular highland area.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah. And so it's do you know the writing rule, like show, don't tell?
Yes.
Right. I think as a GM and as a world builder, that same advice, it's like rumor mill, don't narrate, right? Like 10 rumors that hint at the existence of something is way more interesting than if you just tell the players like, yeah, he says that in Hex 421 there is a Keiko demon spawn point. I guess you guys should go clear it, right? You can do that, but the way with scouting ledger and rumors, it gets really sexy.
And one of the things with the scouting ledger is it's way more reliable than rumors because it's you. You were the one who was there. You didn't write down that there was insects, and it was just you were messing with yourself in your own diary.
Right. So Black Lodge says, how do you handle splitting the spoils of war among players? 50% generally goes to the army leader. The rest of the army, do you just split the spoils in a party equally like Dungeon Delves? So I'll let Chubby answer that. I don't know if he's encountered that in his own games, and then I'll give my answer.
Everything in my experience, right? This is true for almost any game I'm running, unless it's like some weird game like Alien where it's not really long term. I leave all of those decisions in the hands of the player. A great example, if somebody's absent for a week and the party clears out a area, they get 2,000 gold pieces, and then the person comes back for next week's session. Whether that person gets a share of that 2,000, that's up to them. That's not me. And that might create some tension between the players, but whatever that tension is, it's way less than somebody being upset with me making a command decision that they have to live with when it's their life, it's their money. If you read history, there's a lot of times where spoils of war caused defeats because the army broke and all the individual like light cavalry or whatever ran off to grab the spoils from the tent. This happened to the Ottomans like 2 or 3 times, I think. Yeah, they had undisciplined soldiers that broke ranks to spoil the enemy camp and just got rocked. Mm-hmm. I'm pretty sure when Jan Sobieski did the ride of the Polish hussars into the Ottoman lines, that was the context, that the Ottomans were broken up dealing with spoils or something like that. I mean, like it happened like multiple times to the Ottomans because they employed barely trained light cavalry units to harass the enemy. So those guys went right after the enemy camp and they lost.
Mm-hmm.
So if the commander of the army is organized and says this is how we're going to split up the spoils of war, then that's what happens. If he's disorganized, he's got a bigger problem than splitting up the spoils.
Right. I'll just say Black Lodge. So I am fortunate, I suppose, in that both of my groups are very, very communitarian. They are all for one for all. And so for the most part, it would never occur to them to even question whether or not loot and XP and things like that should be distributed in any way except an equitable way that keeps everybody together and leveling up together. They're just very Three Musketeers-y about everything. And they even go out of their way, like, even if it makes no economic sense to like go, raise Chris's favorite henchman from the dead because he wasn't that high level and it's not worth the money. But like they do it just because everybody loves everybody and they want to do it. There are other folks on the ACKS community, like Arbithril, for instance, plays with a group that's much more cutthroat and zero sum, and I've seen that happen in some pickup games I've been in, and I think it could be very interesting in a group like that. I think Spoils of War could degenerate in exactly the way that Chubby has just described. So essentially, I think we've got like two poles of behavior, right? We have like Three Musketeers and Turkish Sultan, where you slaughter all of your brothers when you take the throne, and
Yeah.
like sort of along that axis are the different play styles of where you're going to end up. I tend to be happier over here with like the Three Musketeers, one for all for one. Like like I play with my friends. I want my friends to have fun, and I'm not trying to screw them over, unless it's a war game or something where I am.
Yeah.
Um,
Generally, that's how my guys are in my experience.
yeah,
They even give shares of treasure sometimes to people who were absent for, if a kid's one of them's kids gets sick or something like that. People will be like, "Hey, here's 200 gold. It's not fair for you to miss out on that." And then we're all going to be, like you said, at different leveling points.
yeah, yeah. So Michael Kalea says, would you recommend we play with figures on tiles during combat? So I do play with figures on a battle map. Not everyone does. Partly, I play with figures on a battle map because my IQ is about a standard deviation lower when it comes to visual spatial than it is to math and verbs. So I find it really helpful to actually have a map I can look at on the table. It aids me in narrating. I have other friends who can just, freely rotate complex three-dimensional images in their head and remember where everyone is located and just describe that off the cuff, and they seem to not need it. Chubby, you strike me as someone who's a really strong visual thinker just from your layouts and map
Yeah,
making.
I use Roll20 for almost everything now.
Yeah.
I'm going to be at North Texas in a week. It's going to be the first time I've actually played face to face in probably over 5 years, because Roll20 is so effective. It fits into my life. It makes it so that I can play without having to leave my family and go out and deal with problems. I just love it. So I run everything on Roll20. One of my friends likes to run Foundry modules every once in a while, but otherwise it's Roll20.
Yeah.
And I put up the map. I do think it helps to have one of the tricks that I just recently started doing is putting treasure as tokens on the map that are unlabeled. So it's just like a bag, so it's in this, unless it's hidden. I mean, if it's hidden, then whatever. But I'll put it on the map, and then the player will be able to visually see, that come into the room. It'll be a reminder for me to hand out the tray. It offloads some of the things for me to remember from a room description and just puts it into the Roll20 environment, so I don't even have to remember. And then I can just double click on the icon, and it'll say this is a +2 sword of whatever, and okay, here it is. And I don't have to reference anything. I don't have to pull it up. It's all right there. So I think using tokens and creatively, you can do that for traps, secret doors, all kinds of stuff to take the load off of you figuring out when can they see this or that, when can they, how close would they be to pick it up, that kind of thing.
Yeah, for sure. So Dallas wants to know, can I run combat in hexes? Yes. In fact, the Domains at War mass combat system uses hexes, and the ship combat system uses hexes, and you're assumed to be using hexes in the wilderness. So I really like hexes, except insofar as I can't do 90-degree Roman buildings on hexes, which drives me crazy. But otherwise, I really like hexes. Black Lodge, laugh my ass off. My players are Randians and Nietzscheans. So you apparently have the opposite problem that Chubby and I have, because Chubby, you had to write that last page in Warlords of Gavardia to convince people to live by the sword. I have the same problem.
It's tough. People, most of the guys in my Saturday night group are libertarian minded or strongly freedom oriented, whatever you want to call it. And yet still they'll organize it perfectly communist within a 5-person unit, but if it was, how are you going to deal with the people of the town? They'd be as Randian as they could. I'm going to take everything. I'm going to do this. And that's, I think, just a matter of in-group and out-group. They've got, this is their group. This is their friends. They're going to do that. And you see that in military units all the time. So
yeah, absolutely.
I think it's a common thing.
Yeah, absolutely. It's definitely harder if they don't have any in-group loyalty, right? It's definitely, you have to run a different type of campaign, I think, if you're playing with a group that has no in-group loyalty. It becomes Adventurer Cyberpunk King a little bit more than it's a different vibe. So yeah, so Gary says all my players are looking for ways to one up the others, and it's going to get ugly soon. Yeah.
Gary's running a like a new world exploration. Like these people have arrived with like one town and a huge wilderness and everything.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of room in that kind of a campaign for you to betray people and carve out your own little space. Yeah.
Yeah, I would really like to run a chaotic campaign at some point with ACKS, high level chaotic, where each person is like, oh, you're a warlock, you're an evil crusader, and then just completely let it go to town. I think that would be really, really good fun. And then afterwards, no one would ever talk to each other again, and they would not be friends anymore. But for that brief
I'm a
6
big
months,
fan
it would
of
be
the
amazing.
video game Dungeon Keeper, where you're running the dungeon and heroes are the enemy that come in and attack your stuff. And I think that's a useful idea sometimes, especially like, ACKS II has all the rules about sanctums and dungeons and stuff to recruit, to get monster parts for magical research and so on. And you can build your own little undermountain in order to run your magical research. And in Mulyotti, there's a island, I think, if I'm remembering correctly, I think it's an island where there's a sanctum that the monsters killed the wizard, and so there's just a bunch of monsters that are there living their best life without being harvested. And so the player could move in and take over that sanctum. There's a level 8 mage in the party, and they could just start say, this is going to be my stronghold here. Oh, that's good to hear.
So just shared some praise from Yuan-Ti for you. So nice to see. And then Antoyo says, do they become points of pride in competition between PCs? My henchman can beat up your henchman kind of stuff.
I've actually, in my experience, this could be my game, but my players like their henchmen to interact with each other. We had a couple of henchmen that I like to just pick a name of a person that everybody will remember, because it's much easier to remember that your henchman is Joe Rogan than if it's some random name that you made up on the fly with a lot of consonants. So we had like a Ronda Rousey and a Joe Rogie and a couple of guys like that, and two of them got romantic and ended up getting married and retire. That was their story for why they retired as henchmen, was that they So in my experience, players have liked their henchmen to kind of have the same camaraderie, and that's the way it's worked in Great Brother.
So Antoyo, what? Yes, very, very good camaraderie. So Antoyo, I talk about this a little bit in the Judges Journal, but I think it's really important that players understand that henchmen are not additional player characters. There are some people who will treat a henchman as an additional player character, and so let's say they have a charisma 18, and so they'll show up with 7 henchmen, and no one else in the group even has a single henchman. And so then when it comes time for combat, they'll expect to think, well, I get to go 8 times per combat round because I have my PC and 7 henchmen, and everyone else will just sit and wait for me. And so what I stress in the Judges Journal is that because someone's your henchman doesn't mean he's an extra PC. And so one of the things we do in the Grey Brotherhood is that the henchman, who's controlling the henchman, will change depending on how many people, how many characters are controlling what. So like if Bob shows up with 7 henchmen and no one has any other henchmen, then during the combat, we just divvy out the henchmen. So Jim and so-and-so and so-and-so and so-and-so and so-and-so are each playing 1 henchman during the fight. And that takes away a lot of the zero-sum game element of I'm going to bring my henchmen so I can have the spotlight time more often, and I'm going to flex on how awesome my henchmen are versus your henchmen, by really treating the henchmen as NPCs that are loyal to your character, but that you don't necessarily directly control. Getting to directly control them is just a convenience of the virtual tabletop or the table. It isn't necessarily something that has to be done at the table all the time. So that's how I handle it.
something that acts is requires a different thought process, and we all struggled with this at the beginning in my group, is that with the reserve XP system and the way that it works, you really don't want to think of the henchman as the person you're going to be when your main character dies, which is a thought process that a lot of people bring in from playing classic D&D.
Right.
And if you die, you're gone, and you're making a new character with however much reserve XP you have, and that henchman is either going to stay in the party or leave, but they're no longer controlled by your character. It's like a drone, and the handset that controls the drone is smashed. That you don't become the drone crashes or flies away. Like that's the way it is. So a lot of times players, when we first started playing, they would be like, well, when I die, I'm going to become Joe Rogan. I was like, no, Joe Rogan is going to go, well, he died, I'm going to go back to town. And you're going to make a new character with 2000 XP or however much you've saved. And once players get into that thought process, they save a lot more reserve XP.
Absolutely.
I had a guy, I'm sure Alex remembers, I used to tell stories about, he had developed a reserve XP system of multi-level marketing a juice product. So every time he came back to town, he would buy more juice product that he would store in his little cottage under the promise that he was going to resell it later for a higher markup. And it was all just a scam to dump all of his gold. And I had another player.
Right. It's hilarious.
He set up a dog sanctuary and just started pouring all his extra money into the dog sanctuary. And that kind of thing, is a great way of getting through that thought process. Like you're taking this, you're setting it aside as an insurance essentially, and then you're moving forward. You could use all that gold to buy magic items, but then if you die, it's over. So people are more conservative when they come to accept that reality.
Yep, absolutely. And also, to me, a big important reason for the reserve XP and the heroic funeral rules is I had this realization that sometimes players are more cautious than their characters would be, right? Yep. Like if you're a Viking who believes that you will go to Valhalla if you die in battle, sword in hand, and you can literally see your guy next to you who's a priest of Odin is literally casting spells that Odin has channeled through his body, you can be really confident that Valhalla is real. And so it's going to really change your attitude about what it would mean to die in battle. You're not going to be afraid of it. But if you're the player who just really loves his PC and you don't want to be stuck playing a first level guy, then you're going to really keep your character much more cautious than the actual character would be in the world. And so reserve XP and heroic funerals were my way of allowing you to play a character who's as brave as an Achilles or an Eric the Red, without punishing you and forcing you to be Mr. Super Caution. So, yeah. So, we hit our 9.
Oh, I was gonna say, I had players who got to where they weren't afraid of death either. They were fine with it. It's like that meme: if he dies, he dies.
Because I had enough reserve XP.
Yeah.
Yep. Oh, you broke up a little bit for me there.
Oh, sorry.
No, it's okay. A lag, I think, on my end. Listen, we hit our 90 minutes. Why don't we close out and tell folks where they can find your stuff? Maybe mention your other products that they need to check out, and we can wrap it up there.
Cool. Yeah, everything I have is on DriveThruRPG under Chubby Funster, and I have pretty wide variety of stuff. I have written stuff for these books for ACKS II. I've written a lot of stuff for Shadowdark, including a Dark Sun conversion that is one of my more popular items called Shadow Sun. And I've done kind of player and GM extra stuff books that have been very successful. And I've written my own OSR Heartbreaker called Ambition and Avarice. That's a first and a second edition. The first one is more like ACKS I in terms of being a very slim, efficient chassis. And then the second one is got a lot more detail and a bigger bestiary and magic and all kinds of stuff like that I didn't put into the original one. and there's little supplements for some other stuff. I wrote a little supplement for Alien that covers some rules that I didn't feel like they were covering, and how much air is actually in this thing that I'm refilling my vacuum suit from. How does this port actually work? Because I had players ask me questions like that. So I just, when I think of something, I write something up and then put it out. I publish stuff very regularly. So just check out my publisher page.
And the link to that is in the description below, guys. So you can see it there. Easy to find, one click. All right. Well, Chubby, thanks so much for coming on the show, man. It's awesome to have you, and awesome to see Sandbox and starter set type stuff getting made for ACKS. I think you've gone further than anyone else has done on that regard. So it's really awesome to see.
Yeah, and I'd love to get feedback from people and how to improve, and maybe come up with another area where we could have another Mulyotti, another setup. That'd be great. If people have feedback that could help me refine ideas and so on. My only closing message is leave reviews. It's important for everybody that's an independent producer. It's super important.
Absolutely.
Leave reviews, even if it's just leaving stars. Leaving stars is better than nothing. Leaving a written review is the best. So thanks to everybody who's
makes a huge difference.
Been supportive and left reviews for me in the past. It's very appreciated.
Definitely. All right. Well, thanks everyone for tuning in to ACKS to Grind. It's another good grinding of the ACKS tonight, and we'll be back in a week. Until then, catch everyone on Discord, X, etc. You know where to find us. Cheers.